Needy Streamer Overload, a social media management game that I initially had low expectations for, but what I got instead was a mindfuck masterpiece that represents the internet and how parasocial relationships can destroy an already broken person, leading them down the rabbit hole. I played the game for a total of 10 hours with every ending and achievement unlocked, and it's safe to say I'm a huge fan of this insane psychological episode that touches on the right subjects, whilst remaining weirdly satire. It's an excellent example of how to mix the contrast between the bright and dark side of the streaming world, and an interesting take on the ever-growing genre of horror that had me completely hooked. So in this review, we'll overdose on info to answer the question, should you play Needy Streamer Overload? NSO doesn't follow a direct linear storyline, instead we are given goals to reach throughout the game, with many paths that can lead to other outcomes. Almost like an iceberg, things start off tame, but as each day passes, things become more chaotic, going down the iceberg. We play as P-chan, and we are tasked to help out our girlfriend, Ame, through her streamer journey, with the goal to grow and become an internet angel, hence the name of her persona, K-Angel. I won't say much about the premise from here, as I don't want to spoil a single bit of the experience, but let's just say I was surprised by the storyline and its many connected paths. NSO on the surface looks like some cute and quirky game that's trying to be edgy, but when you actually get into things, it proves it's the exact opposite. At first I didn't like Ame, I thought she was selfish, rude and toxic, but the more you progress through the game, the more you realise that's not truly her. She's aware of her flaws and hates those parts of herself. She's not truly a cruel person, she's just an insecure broken girl. And in contrast, her persona, K-Angel, is energetic, angelic, and has the exact opposite traits, almost like she's a different person entirely. But to me, that's not the case. Both Ame and K-Angel are separate in some sense, but the two are still part of each other, and it's clear to me that the two symbolize both parts of her personality. K-Angel is the happy lover of life, whilst Ame is her gloomy, selfish side, and deep down she's using her persona as a way to express her true feelings, much like many of us do online. Most of us are completely different online compared to the real world, and it's easy to get lost on the internet and sell yourself as this perfect person, and NSO perfectly captures this reality. If anything, you as a player are the one to dictate how Ame ends up, depending on your treatment of her throughout the game. In other words, you influence the influencer. The premise of this game completely hooked me. It's more of a moral simulator. You don't have those choices in a traditional sense. Instead, the game route will change depending on your actions during gameplay, usually linked to what activities you have Ame partake in, her stat levels such as stress, affection and darkness. All of this can lead to a variety of different endings, some bad, some good, some terrifying, and others batshit crazy. This game offers you many options throughout its stages of gameplay, and it causes this dilemma of what a healthy dosage of internet is. Ame is a mentally ill girl who has no respect for herself and views herself as nothing. She relies on P-chan to take over her life because she herself feels like she's not living, trapped in her own mind. She's had an awful life and has made many mistakes, but deep down she strives for something more, without needing to rely on someone. So she uses K-Angel to immerse herself in this delusion. She overdoses on her obsession and becomes reliant on K-Angel, becoming this godlike figure. In other words, in reality, she's trapped in her own mind, eating out her mental state. But online, she's trapped in a never-ending loop of unhealthy addiction, to the point where the two personalities begin to merge. Which is heartbreaking. Change is natural, but forcing yourself into becoming someone you are not is only going to hurt you even more. Now, there are paths that can lead to a healthier Ame, and others that can lead her down a path of self-destruction, but all of that is left up to you. This game makes use of player freedom. Sometimes you'll end up on the path you wanted the least, and trust me, some of these paths make you feel awful. But the game isn't without its wholesome and beautiful moments. At points you will see Ame grow and become a healthier person who stops relying on addiction and instead focuses on the real world. And I think the overall message I took from this game's narrative was that it's never too late to switch off and take a break. Overall, NSO is a narrative that's not overly complex to understand but does have a complex formula, but when you start to get more endings and outcomes, things become clear, and by the end the story is wrapped up nicely and leaves a bittersweet feeling in your heart. I love Ame and K-Angel. I think they are extremely well written characters, and the game primarily focuses on the two, and that allows them to start world building after the duo. As the two merge, the internet merges with them. This game is a perfect representation of mental illness, self-harm, and addiction, and how the internet can worsen these conditions. But it never tries too hard. The game is filled with satire, humor, and pop culture references to lighten the mood in the right places, which just adds to that sudden moment when things go from to what the fuck. And honestly, I can't think of anything particularly negative to say here, other than if you prefer a direct path for your story games, then I'd still recommend it despite its path formula, though it's not for everyone. But to me, this game's storytelling is flawless. With that being said, I think it's time to load a new save. If I had to describe NSO's gameplay loop, I'd say addicting, fast-paced, and stressful. A basic rundown would be you have a 30-day calendar system where you have follower milestones that you need to reach before a deadline. To reach those points and to expand your reach, you'll need to research and stream across various topics. If you miss the deadline, you'll need to try again. Each day is split into 3 segments, and each segment allows you to partake in any of these activities, ranging from gaming, bonding, a different kind of bonding, cheating, hardcore drugs, binge watching your favorite anime, doom scrolling, visiting locations, and there's also a few other activities. Doing these activities can raise Arme's status meter. If you go beyond a certain cap, you'll be in trouble, so you'll have to manage those stats and make sure you're keeping them at a safe amount. Though that depends on what ending you're aiming for. You can decrease these stats via other activities, but it's always a good idea to keep an eye on them and plan your time usage. And at the end of the day, you'll be able to stream. You start off with a few basic streams, but to unlock more, you need to fulfill certain conditions, whether it's follower milestones, partaking in certain activities, and things like that. You can also decrease Arme's stress by deleting hate comments, which is really sad and cute at the same time. And some streams will also give you more followers, adding a hint of strategy, almost like a real algorithm, which is kinda cool. And honestly, this system is super engaging. And at first it is very slow, but as you pick things up and learn the basics, things go by fast. The devs have captured the formula and have made sure every aspect is refined to create this very fun system that's replayable and feels different each run. You may also encounter random events and be forced to increase certain stats, which could throw off your playthrough, though luckily the game saves on each morning every day, so you can reload if necessary. I also like that many of your interactions with Arme will unlock secret endings, and you can get many within the first few days. I also think it's interesting that one mistake can destroy your whole entire playthrough, giving you an undesired ending, which is both funny and stressful. I also find the fact that you are controlling Arme's PC to partake in these activities super cool if it's a game with this retro vibe. However, there are a few flaws, some personal and some are common complaints, the first of which is there may be a few bugs during your playthrough that may force you to completely reset. For example, I got a bug where it wouldn't progress to the next day and stayed frozen, so I had to restart. This isn't anything game breaking, but for some, I have heard this game has many issues that completely break their saves, forcing them to start their whole entire run. Or there may be a bug where specific endings just won't trigger despite you meeting the exact conditions. But other than that, I noticed no other issues during my playthrough. Of course, some of you watching may have other complaints. Let me know in the comments about them, about how harsh the game could be for triggering certain events or one particular ending being triggered by sheer chance, but to be fair, that's pretty subjective. Me personally, I loved achieving every ending, though it did get tedious at points, and some endings had conditions that were too similar, so I'd often need to watch over the same endings play out over and over again with no way to skip them, but in the end everything leaves you with pure satisfaction and bliss. And now, let's load up our final save. Needy streamer Overload gripped me with a surprisingly realistic message. I love the focus on Ame and her alter ego, and how they are the personification of the disinhibition effect. Ame is a broken girl who wants to change, but instead of healing the right way, she feeds into addiction and her sense of self begins to blur, as her persona starts to become her. However, all of that depends on what path you choose for Ame, which is super cool to me that each player will experience a different fate on their first playthrough. And when you work up to unlocking that true ending and finding out her true fate, it just feels so rewarding. NSO is an experience that just kept reeling me in without holding back. With its retro aesthetic, banging energetic soundtrack, pop culture references, engaging gameplay, and disturbing nature with a beautiful art style. The way it switches from cutesy to disturbing in an instant is seamless. I genuinely felt uncomfortable at points because some of it hit close to home, and that goes to show how effective this game is. The meaning behind this masterpiece is definitely up to your interpretation, but that's what makes it so great. So I'll be giving Needy Streamer Overload a whopping 95% on the Revs meter for its exceptional take on the genre and genius use of sensitive topics. If you enjoyed this review, then make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. I appreciate any support. If you have any feedback or criticism, then let me know in the comments. It really helps. I strive to bring you all the best possible reviews. And with that, thank you for watching, and remember to take a healthy dose of media.